here, because we're going to talk about what trauma is. I'm going to let the expert talk to you what the trauma is, okay? I'll let her step in. This is Toni.
All right. So, let's talk about trauma and what causes it. Trauma is an emotional response to a terrible event. It's a major event that is psychologically overwhelming for us. So all of us have probably seen a mom with a baby, right? With an infant to about a year old. And mom looks at baby, and baby smiles back at mom, and then mom smiles back at baby, and then baby smiles back at mom. And then after a little while, baby has to look away. Because what's happening there is that mom is helping to build the baby's joy capacity, okay? Now, joy capacity, that part of our brain where joy is held, is the only part of the brain that has the ability to grow until the day we die. And that's because God's natural intent for us was to live in joy, okay? So, now, if mom continues to engage with baby like that, allowing for the baby to quiet and rest, and then allowing for the baby to re-engage, that builds joy capacity. And by the time a baby is 8 months old, they can spend up to 8 hours a day doing that with mom, just building joy, and that's what creates a healthy baby. Now, if you're not getting that, if the mom insists on keeping the baby engaged, or the mom doesn't allow the baby to rest, or just has a flat affect, then the baby's joy capacity is going to be really low. Now, why am I talking about joy? Right now, the reason I'm talking about joy is that if my joy capacity is here, and the pain that I experience is here, the differential there is what is called trauma. Okay? So, trauma then is an experience or series of experiences that overwhelms our emotional capacity, our joy capacity, to handle the experience. Trauma tends to damage other areas of life related to the initial trauma as well. That makes sense, right? Immediately after a traumatic event, shock and denial tend to be the first course of action, right? Longer-term reactions include unpredictable emotions, flashbacks, strained relationships, and even physical symptoms like headaches or nausea. And then when we see in the super severely traumatized, like those who are part of the occult, they'll even experience a lot of physical pain. We've even seen them where they're bleeding and things like this as well, as a result of what's happening to them in their head, all right, in their mind. So, as a result of being overwhelmed, we are diminished as persons and are not able to act like ourselves in situations. We are unable to live basically from the heart that Jesus gave us. I'd like to make a distinction here between suffering and between trauma. Okay, trauma is anything that reduces who we are or who we understand ourselves to be. The unregulated emotional intensity of a traumatic event reduces us to less than we were before it happened. That's a big deal when you think about it. Trauma is reducing us to less than who we are before the trauma occurs. Now, suffering, on the other hand, I love Thomas Gerlich, his explanation of what suffering is. He says that, on the other hand, those who suffer are at peace with themselves and with the world. Sufferers may find their capacities drastically reduced, even to the point of death, but they continue to be themselves with the capacities and dominion they have left. And a perfect example of suffering would be Jesus. He remained himself in the middle, even to the point of death. He was able to remain himself with the trauma that he was enduring, okay? So, there are basically, we're going to bust this down into two types of trauma, okay? Now, there's type A trauma, and type A trauma is the absence of good things in our lives, okay? Type B trauma is the addition of bad things in our lives, all right? So, I want to give you an example. Let's say a type B, the addition of bad things trauma, person goes to a prayer line in church or comes to one of you for prayer and says, you know what, I have this memory of being abused and I need prayer. The prayer minister prays with them, you pray with them, invite Jesus into the memory. Jesus does all these cool things in the memory. The person gets healing. I feel better. And we as prayer ministers, yay, God healed you. Isn't that great? Okay? Now, type A trauma person goes to a prayer line and says something like, you know what, I just struggle with relationships. I feel really lonely. So the prayer minister prays for them, and then when they're done, how you doing? I don't really feel all that different. And unfortunately, either the prayer minister or the church or the friends, what we tend to do is we tend to say, well, you must just not have enough faith, which just further traumatizes the person, okay? Now, let me give you some examples of type A trauma. That's the absence of good things in our lives. Not being cherished and celebrated by one's parents simply by the virtue of our existence. That's a type A trauma. Not having the experience of being a delight. Abandonment, rejection, malnutrition, isolation, lack of love, no encouragement, insecure attachments, not having a parent take the time to understand who you are, encouraging you to share who you are, what you think and what you feel, and not receiving large amounts of non-sexual physical nurturing, laps to sit on, arms to hold you, and a willingness to let you go when you've had enough. Not receiving age-appropriate limits and having those limits enforced in ways that do not call your value into question. Not being able to do hard things, taught how to do hard things, and not given opportunities to develop personal resources and talents. Now, because type A traumas occur because there's a lack of healthy relationship, okay? What's crazy about type A traumas is that they're only going to be healed in relationship with other people, which starts falling into part of what Mike was talking about with community and community life, that we have it in the Father's hands, okay? So to try to help meet that relational need, we have what's called community and community life. And these groups are established to help teach participants the joy and relationship building skills needed for the brain to heal through the development of secure, healthy attachments with God and others in maturing in a giving community. Now, let's go to type B trauma, okay? Type B trauma, the presence of bad things. Obviously, physical abuse, including face slapping, hair pulling, shaking, punching, and tickling a child into hysteria. Now, the reason I'm going through the specifics here is a lot of times we don't realize what trauma is because we're raised in this thing and we think that it's normal. Or maybe we had a lot of trauma in our life, someone comes to us and they have a problem, one of these problems, and they're like, you're thinking, what's the big deal? I had it much worse than that, and it's normal, right? Okay, anything spanking or any type of spanking that becomes violent, leaving marks or bruises or emotional scars. Sexual abuse, including inappropriate touching, sexual kissing or hugging, intercourse, oral or anal sex, voyeurism, exhibitionism, or the sharing of one's parents' sexual experiences with the child, incest or molestation. Verbal abuse or name calling is a type B trauma. Murder, rape, assault, humiliation, betrayal, contempt, abandonment by a parent, torture, or satanic ritual abuse. Even witnessing someone else being abused, and even now what we're seeing is with the videos, the first-person shooter video games can be super traumatic, okay? Therapy can assist in uncovering type B traumas, many of which remain lost to the person's conscious mind and memory well into adulthood. Healing usually requires finding the wound, opening the hurt feelings just enough so that you can really understand the effect of the trauma on the person and for themselves, and then praying that the Lord will bring full healing for the recovered memory. If either of these types of trauma persist, because our brains like to rest, the brain will shut down into an energy conservation state known as dissociation. Okay? And if this happens, especially with children before the ages of like 6 to 8, all right, it's in these that those will most likely develop what is known as dissociative identity disorder, or D.I.D. So let me kind of give you an example of what we're talking about here. All right, so dissociation itself is on a continuum, and that's a really lousy pen, isn't it? Okay, so everybody dissociates, all of us do, all right? So I'm driving my car, and I'm thinking about the grocery list, all right? That's a form of dissociation. Daydreaming is another form of dissociation that all of us do. A deeper level might be, oh, thank you. I don't know. Okay, a deeper level still of dissociation might be, I get in a fight with my spouse. I can't think about that right now because I got to go to work. All right, that's a form of dissociation. A deeper level still would be what we call ego states, which are basically themes in our lives like abandonment or rejection. They're there and they're present, but we're not fully aware of them in our day-to-day life. Okay, so that would be what's called an ego state, and that would be another form of dissociation. A deeper level still would be I rage and I see myself raging, but I can't stop myself from raging. All right. Also, what I'm seeing, to give another example of that, is I'm texting, even though the person told me to stop sending them 300 texts a day, but I can't stop myself because I've got some attachment stuff going on there. All right, and that could be dissociation. All right. The deeper level still would be what we're calling dissociative identity disorder, and that's going to be typically people who've had some severe trauma before the age of 6, 7, and some even say 8 because of the brain development. Okay. And then the farthest one is going to be satanic ritual abuse, where they are purposely traumatized to create D.I.D. and a whole bunch of other little things that go off of that. Okay? So,
Excuse me, did you say ego or eco? ECO or
ego? Ego state.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Well, that's good because it looks like mine is a little bit more permanent. Whoopsie. Okay. So this is a fractured heart. Okay, even secular psychology right now, the new trend is basically that all of us have parts to ourselves. Okay? Now, obviously as Christians, we're going to say there's at least 3 parts to us. Right? Makes sense. Father, Son, Holy Spirit in one body. Functional identity, emotional identity, and protector identity all in one body. All right. Our functional identity, it's their job to do life for us. Very task-oriented. Yeah, going to take care of business. All right. Our emotional identity holds and feels emotion for us. Our protector identity, it's their job to keep emotion from function because it is their belief that if we let emotion up, I will not be able to function. Okay? Now, what's fascinating is that when you have dissociative identity disorder, or even those who don't have dissociative identity disorder, we're finding that you can have other parts, right, fractures in the soul that are here. So I can have extra functional identities, I can have extra protector identities, I can have extra emotional identities. All right? Now, that's just an example of what's kind of happening here. Dissociation, as a defense, is the best defense mechanism anyone can use to deal with pain. These people are not mentally ill. It's a fantastic, God-given defense mechanism to deal with pain. It is the instant, complete forgetting of a trauma. It effectively disconnects the person from the event. The traumatic memories are stored in parts, sometimes called alters, where the events remain hidden from the other parts. If it is learned early in life, before the age 6 or 7, it becomes the preferred method of coping. Since it's the best defense, it's used all the time. Not only does it allow the person to live without the awareness of pain, but the switching between part to part, a protector part might come up if the person's feeling threatened. Okay? If something emotional is happening, I might be feeling that a little bit, and then, woo, protector part comes up and says, no, no, and then, oh, I gotta go to work, function part comes up. Okay? So, parts can be used to fit in practically anywhere in order to avoid pain and further trauma. D.I.D. cannot develop in a person unless they are highly bright and intellectual, smart as a whip, and they're super creative. Okay? So, whenever I see a person that has been traumatized or has D.I.D. or I see them switching, I know 2 things. 1, the good news is they're super bright. 2, the sad thing is I know they've been severely traumatized. Okay? The use of dissociation as a defense enables a young child to grow up innocent and free from the awful memories that would otherwise prevent major developmental problems. Okay, I'm not going to go into all the beautiful things about dissociation because I'm running out of time. I see that, Michael. One thing I do want to tell you, just to give you another example of what we're dealing with and what it looks like, okay? So, I want you to picture yourself, you're a wounded child. I want you to picture yourself, close your eyes, everybody close your eyes. I want you to picture yourselves in a metal shell. And that is a part that is protecting you. That is inside a metal chest. That's another protector part, way that you're protecting yourself. That is inside a metal house, that's inside a metal fortress, that's buried underneath the sea. And all of those barriers are to keep people away from me because people hurt me. Okay? You can open your eyes now. Now, that's one part of dissociative identity disorder. The other part is, but if you love me, you'll come find me. Okay? So when working with these people, or living with them, or ministering with them, one time you might get, I can't wait to see you, yay! The other time is, I can't stand you, get away from me. A lot of back and forth. Particularly if you're pressing into love on them, okay, because they want it and they need it so desperately, but those protective parts are going to come up and say, no, you're not safe for me. You're going to end up hurting us, no matter, even if you haven't done anything wrong. And you can be doing the most loving gesture and sacrificing to love the person. And then what ends up happening is they will twist it somehow and make it ugly, that you're not loving them somehow. All right? So that's to give you a brief, quick description of dissociative identity disorder and trauma and how that works.
That was the crash course, guys.
Crash course, crash course.